There are days when preseason does not give you that one huge headline. It gives you pressure that keeps building. And right now, the Chargers are sitting exactly in that kind of spot. One open offensive line job that could shape Justin Herbert's protection. One defensive rookie already making important people look twice. One veteran corner carrying a serious amount of responsibility. And one possible return that only makes sense if Los Angeles truly sees value in the depth. This is not just some roster checklist. This is identity being tested before camp. So subscribe now, because today we are talking about who deserves trust when the season starts getting tight. The first battle of the day might look small on paper, but to me it screams something much bigger: protection. When you look at the Chargers going into training camp, almost the entire offensive line already has a face, a role, and real responsibility attached to it. Rashawn Slater is back healthy. Joe Alt is too. Tyler Biadasz is locked in as the starting center. Cole Strange is set at right guard. That is structure. That is the kind of foundation a serious team has to put in front of Justin Herbert. But then there is left guard. And that spot, my friend, is not some tiny footnote. It could decide whether this line becomes a complete wall, or whether there is still one crack for AFC defenses to attack over and over again. Right now, the player who seems to be out in front is Kayode Awosika. He has been working with the first-team offense. He has taken advantage of those reps, and that matters because coaches do not just give those opportunities away because they like somebody. Awosika comes from Detroit with 4 years of NFL experience, the ability to play multiple spots, and the kind of reputation that may not scream superstar, but absolutely understands the dirty work. And honestly, sometimes that is exactly the kind of piece that settles an offensive line down. The thing is, fans look at Jake Slaughter and feel that natural impatience. Second-round pick, All-American, two-time first-team All-SEC, smart, physical, decorated, with a resume that is way too strong to ignore. But context changes everything. He played his entire college career at Florida as a center, not a guard. The last time he played guard was back in high school. So the Chargers are doing something I actually respect. They are developing the kid instead of throwing him straight into the fire just to satisfy the urgency of the fan base. Slaughter has the talent to become a major answer, but changing positions in the NFL is not like flipping a switch. It is blocking angles, timing, stunt recognition, hand placement, leverage, and communication with both the tackle and the center. If Los Angeles wants to build something that actually lasts, patience here is not fear, it is investment. And Trevor Penning? He is still in the mix, but he has mostly been working with the third team and getting reps on the right side as well. For now, that sounds more like a push for versatility and depth than a real charge at the starting job. So the emotional read is this: Awosika may be ahead because he gives them safety right now. Slaughter may be the future because he has the ceiling and the intelligence. Penning could become an emergency piece if he rebuilds his value. But left guard has to be settled with a cold head, because Herbert does not need a pretty promise. He needs 5 men moving like one wall when the pressure arrives. On the other side of the ball, there is a story with the kind of energy that can change the mood of an entire camp. Genesis Smith is making noise early, and I love when a story starts like this, without the giant spotlight, without first-round status, without fake pressure. Just a 4th-round rookie showing up, practicing, reading the field, and forcing the Chargers building to pay attention. Chris O'Leary praised his ball skills, his anticipation, and even compared the way Smith feels the game to a quarterback's vision. For a young safety, that is a serious compliment. A safety cannot live off pretty hits alone. He has to see things early. He has to understand the route before the receiver finishes the break. He has to feel the quarterback trying to manipulate coverage. When a defensive coordinator talks about that kind of instinct this early, the fan base should absolutely raise an eyebrow. The detail that makes this even more interesting is that Genesis Smith has already picked off Trey Lance in practice. We are not turning one minicamp play into a coronation, obviously, but we are also not going to pretend it means nothing. A rookie who takes the ball away early, gets public praise, and starts showing up in internal conversations is usually doing something right. The fit with Derwin James is what really makes this story exciting. Derwin is a rare weapon. He can come down into the box, attack the backfield, cover the slot, disguise looks, mess with protections, and do a little bit of everything. But the more Derwin has to put out fires deep, the less freedom he has to wreck an opposing offense near the line. So if Genesis Smith can become that deeper, smarter safety with the range and instincts to patrol the back end, the impact is not just adding a starter, it is freeing Derwin to be Derwin. And that, Bolt Nation, is dangerous for any offense. The competition is still real. Tony Jefferson has experience. Elijah Molden is in that path too. Genesis has not been handed anything. But that is the beauty of this story. A mid-round pick trying to cut the line because of what he is showing on the field. For a team trying to make real noise in the AFC, finding cheap young value is not a luxury. It is smart survival. The Chargers already had a competitive defense, especially in coverage, but they were still looking for that piece that turns good execution into a turnover, a good call into a change of possession, a good secondary into a real threat. If Smith keeps growing, maybe Los Angeles did not just find depth. Maybe they found a quiet key to making this defense looser, more aggressive, and a whole lot more unpredictable. The conversation gets less shiny now, and a lot more uncomfortable, because not every Chargers concern comes from an open job. Sometimes it comes from one job looking too dependent on one player. That is where Donte Jackson comes in. Los Angeles spent the offseason rebuilding several parts of the roster. The offensive line was rebuilt, new blockers arrived, new targets came in, the defensive front got help, and young pieces are entering the rotation. But at cornerback, the story was different. Benjamin St-Juste left for Green Bay. The Chargers did not add a major corner after that, and now the room is going to depend on Donte Jackson, Tarheeb Still, and Cam Hart to carry that weight. And I like Jackson a lot. He did not arrive as some national headline name, but he played like an essential piece. 17 games, 7 passes defended, 4 interceptions, and a passer rating allowed of just 56.3, according to Pro Football Focus. That is not quiet production. That is a corner holding the edge, giving stability, and making opposing offenses think twice. But that is exactly why the question gets tighter. Are the Chargers asking too much from him? Gary Davenport of Bleacher Report called Jackson the foundation of this cornerback room. That read makes sense. Outside of Derwin James, the Los Angeles secondary is not packed with ready-made stars. Cam Hart and Tarheeb still have shown flashes. They have grown, and they have given interesting signs, but they are still developing. So Jackson becomes the adult in the room, the example, the best cover man, the player who has to produce and also help keep the emotional structure of the group standing. That is a lot for anybody. For a corner nearing 30, entering the final year of his deal, it is even heavier. This is where the fan base has to debate it honestly. I believe Jackson can handle that load in 2026. He has already shown he understands the scheme, competes, anticipates, finishes plays, and gives a defense exactly the kind of confidence it needs when the opposing quarterback starts testing the outside. But believing in him does not mean ignoring the risk in the way this room is built. St-Juste played 37% of the Chargers' defensive snaps in 2025, almost all of them outside. Those snaps do not just disappear. Somebody has to take them. Maybe Hart makes the jump. Maybe Still takes on more. Maybe Los Angeles still finds a veteran before or during camp. But as the room is built right now, Jackson is the center of gravity. And the emotional part is this. If the Chargers want to be taken seriously in the AFC, they cannot keep living on the edge of the math. A championship-level defense needs answers before the problem becomes an emergency. So I am opening this up to the community. Do you trust Donte Jackson to carry this room for another season? Or do you think Los Angeles still needs to find another corner before camp? Because to me, Jackson is not the problem. The problem is letting him become the only mature answer at a position that can decide big games. The fourth story has a different flavor. It is not the one that blows up the screen. It is not a completed signing, and it is not a name that changes the offense right away. It is one of those stories that can feel small in June, but well-coached teams usually take seriously before the problem shows up. Hassan Haskins is still on the open market, and when you connect that with his history with Jim Harbaugh, it is easy to understand why the possibility of a Chargers return still hangs in the air, especially in a practice squad or depth role. Haskins was a real weapon for Harbaugh at Michigan. In his final college season, he carried the ball 270 times, put up 1,327 yards, and scored 20 touchdowns. Then he became a fourth-round pick by the Titans in 2022. When Tennessee placed him on waivers before the 2024 season, Harbaugh and the Chargers went after a familiar face. That did not happen by accident. Coaches trust certain profiles because they know how a player practices, how he responds, and how he understands the culture. But the cold analysis has to come in too. Haskins does not bring explosive upside at the NFL level. He is more of a north-south runner, physical, direct, and built for basic work. In 2025, he produced only 47 yards on 17 carries, down from what he had shown in 2024. And when the Chargers needed to call up backs from the practice squad, Kimani Vidal ended up taking most of the snaps. That says something. Right now, the top of the room has Omarion Hampton, Vidal, and Keaton Mitchell. That gives them more life, more speed, and more variety. Behind them, though, the depth does not feel locked down. Gregory DeRoche, Jared Patterson, and Amar Johnson are all in that fight, each trying to prove he can be more than a camp name. DeRoche may have the better chance because of special teams, but nothing there feels sealed. So Haskins' path depends on a simple question. Do the Chargers trust the younger backs enough to get through camp and possible injuries without going back to a known option? If the answer is yes, Haskins stays outside. If the answer is no, Harbaugh can look at the phone and choose familiar security. It would not be a glamorous move. It would be a roster survival move. And sometimes, over a long season, That kind of quiet decision keeps one injury from turning depth into desperation. In the end, today's theme is not noise, it is trust. Trust in Awosika to protect Herbert right now, patience with Slaughter to build the future, courage to let Genesis Smith earn space if he keeps forcing attention, responsibility not to overload Donte Jackson, and maturity to treat Haskins as a depth option, not nostalgia. That is how a good roster becomes a reliable roster, by making small decisions with big consequences. The Chargers do not need to win June. They need to get to camp knowing who can carry the weight when the game gets heavy. If you want to follow this season with sharp analysis and no filler, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.